Welcome back to another episode of TNT, the Twisted New Testament. Rabbi Stuart Federow and I are going to discuss the Last Supper of Jesus. Could it have been possibly a Passover Seder, or could it not have been? We're going to find out. Sit tight. We'll be right back. Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of TNT, the Twisted New Testament, with Rabbi Stuart, the man Federow from the Big H, Houston, Texas. Welcome back. Don't smoke crack. You know, that's my new thing, I think. Welcome back. What? Don't smoke crack. It's a positive it's an anti-drug message.
Sounds good to me.
Coming to you straight from TanakTalk.com. I did it to Rabbi Singer, and I think I caught him off guard with that. So, all right. So tonight's going to be an interesting topic for sure. Yes, we have touched base on this before, but it was a long time ago. So now we're going to do it again. And this time we're going to hit it from
this was a suggestion. Somebody made the suggestion.
I think it's a great one. I mean, we are right here.
Yeah.
I mean, Pesach is knocking on our back door as we speak, and now is the time to discuss this. This is the one thing when I was a Christian that I avoided. I didn't really avoid it per se, but I was trying to not get too deep into it, and that was the fact of trying to explain to my friends the whole idea of Jesus being the Passover lamb. And so every year we would come up and have to do an actual series or a lecture or something regarding Jesus. Sorry, I'm getting cozy right now. I'm trying something new. Oh, yeah, this is great. Okay, cool. Regarding Jesus being the Passover lamb and how the Passover Seder had to do, it was a connection with Easter and Jesus forgiving everybody for their sins and dying for your sins and all this other stuff. And every year it got closer and closer to the time to do it. And I kind of wouldn't avoid it at first. At first I just didn't think about it. And then Pesach came around. This is when I was Messianic. And I would spend about 2 weeks before Pesach trying to build up a sermon or some sort of a message to give our people who came to the Seder. And it became harder and harder, and ultimately by the third year, that's basically whenever I finally had to hang up the old Messianic New Testament hat and just leave it all together. So very interesting for sure, no doubt.
How long ago was all that?
That was, Tanakh Talk is going on 5 years, so it would have been around 6.5 years ago, roughly, probably, something like that.
See how much can change in 6 years?
Yes.
It's amazing.
Absolutely.
Things can turn on a dime.
I hope I get
in a heartbeat.
Yep, for sure. That's cool.
Okay.
You're going to laugh whenever you go back and watch this video, by the way. Oh, actually, I forgot. You're watching it now, aren't you?
Well, I was looking up stuff on I want you to go to.
I was
William,
so comfortable too. Yes, go ahead.
How are you with being able to show like the King James with Strong's Concordance numbers and Greek words?
Negatory. I could look it up on the internet, but I have another software, but it's not downloaded on this program, and that would be eSword. They are really good about that. And also PC Study Bible does the same exact thing, and maybe I should download that.
Well, even if you did eSword, which is quick and cheap and easy.
Right.
All right, then if you can do it on, using the internet, I'd appreciate it, okay?
Okay, let me see what I can pull up here. Let's see what we got here. Hope y'all like my work boots.
All right.
Okay.
While you're doing that, you want me to
hang on,
introduce some stuff?
Yeah. Go right ahead, because I'm getting flagged by internet. I'm hoping the internet is still streaming. It looks like it's probably fine, but I'm getting false alarms on my internet stream. But we're good to go. You just go ahead and do your thing. You're fine.
All right. Well, here's the thing. Okay. First of all, everybody, Jews and Christians, seem to want to believe that the Last Supper of Jesus was in fact a Passover Seder when it simply historically could not have been. And I think one of the reasons why Christians want to say, the Last Supper was a Seder, is because they want to see their Christianity having been birthed out of Judaism. And second of all, they want to be able to use the Jewish rituals, life cycle events, holidays, holy days, as foreshadowing, or what's the other word? typology
there you
or whatever for Christianity.
Right.
I think the Jews, up until recently, 5-10 years maybe, the Jewish community wanted to believe that the Last Supper of Jesus was a Passover Seder because they thought it ingratiated themselves to the Christians. Hey, we're not that far apart. Your Jesus was Jewish and we're all alike, and let's, love each other, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya.
Right.
And the problem is that historically, it's impossible. Now, I'm not saying that what Jesus did at his Last Supper wasn't around or about or involved with Passover. What I'm saying is that it probably was, if it even happened, but that's another issue. We're assuming, we're taking it on face value right now. But assuming it happened, it was a Passover celebration. But what they did could not have been anything related to a Seder because the Seder hadn't been invented yet.
Okay.
Now, okay. First thing I want you to do,
actually, I'm not ready just yet. Keep rambling for a second. I got to run a speed test on that.
Okay, well, I always ramble. Rambling, Stuart. Okay. That may be a little bit before your time.
Rambling Man, Rose? Maybe. Rambling Man.
No, Rambling Rose.
Rambling Fever.
You're so young. Okay. At any rate, there are a number of things, and we'll get into details in a little while, but there are a number of issues that if you pick up the New Testament and read it, indicate that it simply could not have been a Passover Seder.
Okay.
Okay. And it may not have even been around Passover time of year. So what issues we're going to look at is, when was the Passover Seder, the Seder, developed? What was the celebration of Passover like before the destruction of the Second Temple? What did Jesus have at the Last Supper? Precisely what did he have? And what does a person have to celebrate Passover with, according to the Torah? Okay, not according to the Haggadah, but according to the Torah, what is used at a Passover celebration? And how did all of this compare with what the Gospels tell us about what Jesus actually did and what he had? And the evidence very much shows that, first of all, it certainly couldn't have been a Passover Seder, and second of all, it may not have even been Passover, which I find to be very funny, but
right.
Maybe people aren't as cynical as I am. All right, you about ready?
Nope. Actually, I will be here in just a second. I just finished running a speed test, sending a text to my internet provider, and they're usually pretty good at responding. I just hope he didn't try to reset me to the show. So you're wanting me to pull up an internet web page, so give me 1 second now that I've got that.
Well, first of all, you can do this with King James. It doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I'm good to go. What do you want?
All right. Well, Exodus 12:8.
All right. Exodus 12:8.
Take a look at Exodus chapter 12, verse 8.
Okay.
Answering the question, what exactly was a person supposed to eat at Passover?
The flesh.
Do what?
They're supposed to eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry. Exodus chapter 12, verse 8. That's what, yeah, okay.
Right.
So they shall eat the flesh in that night. What is the flesh? What does that refer to?
Fresh flesh of the pagan god lamb.
Yes, the Passover lamb, which was the symbol for Egyptians of their pagan god.
Right.
Every single one of Every single one of the 10 plagues can be shown to be an attack on the gods of Egypt. Not on the Egyptians, but on their gods.
Gotcha.
Okay. And I have a list somewhere of exactly which god is being attacked by which plague.
Okay.
Be that as it may, Exodus chapter 12, verse 8 says, and they shall eat the flesh in the night roasted with fire, which means the Passover lamb, and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs shall they eat it. So the three symbols, according to the Torah, of what one is supposed to do regarding the celebration of the Passover is the Passover lamb, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Can
Now
I
let's
can I
take a
throw
look.
let me throw something in there too? Maybe 4 things there. They shall eat,
What?
and maybe 4 things. They shall eat the flesh in that night, hung on a cross, unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs.
Wait, what? I didn't hear you.
I'm being facetious. Okay, it doesn't say
Oh, okay.
hung on a cross. It says roasted with fire. So
Oh no, yes.
you know, you
Okay.
would think that he would have been like burned at the stake, and that would have made more sense. Not like hung on a
Right.
cross.
Yes, that's
So,
very true.
right.
Okay, so the Passover lamb, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs, right?
Right.
Okay, now take a look at how about Matthew 26.
Okay.
Matthew
Got it.
26.
Verse.
Okay, you really do need to get eSword just to make it real quick and easy.
I wonder if I actually have it on. It seemed like I downloaded it one time. Let me see if it's actually on here. Hang on. No, I have Swaniti Eswal. I said eSword download, but I don't have it actually on here. So
It doesn't matter. You don't have to do it now. We can use the internet.
okay. So let me pull that up then while you elaborate on your point there. A little bit here. Let's turn that back off and pull up a website. Okay, so we're going to go to what's the best website that has the Strong's numbers?
I would say
Blue Letter or something?
what is it?
Blue Letter Bible?
No,
Let's see if that's
Bible what's it called? I can't think of the name of it. Bible
Let's see.
Bible Navigator. Bible. I can't remember what it is. It's got a whole bunch of translations on it.
Oh, you're talking about I just lost it.
What we need is an English translation that has the
Right.
Translation with the numbers for each important word of the Strong's Concordance, because you need to see this. Okay.
Okay, we're going to go with lexicon. Let's see, Bible Strong. Olive Tree Bible app. I've got that on my phone. I think you've got to.
All right. Well, be that as it may, you can look it up yourself. If we can't show it to you, you need to look this up yourself, and you'll see what I'm saying.
I got to buy this thing. I don't have that. Okay, let me go back.
Okay.
Go ahead and talk about it. I'll try to find something while you're talking.
All right. Take a look at Matthew 26. Okay.
Okay.
And here's what I'm going to want you to do, either on your own computers, okay, or on, through your computer on the internet. Okay. Take a look at
verse.
It's Matthew 26, and take a look at verse 17.
Okay, got it. We'll put it up on screen for now. Give me time to look for the others. Okay, you're up.
Okay. You have to understand that Hebrew and Greek, Koine Greek in the New Testament, and the Latin of the Vulgate have two completely separate words for types of bread. In Hebrew, we have matzah, which in English is unleavened bread. And in Greek, it is adzumos.
Okay.
But we also have a separate word meaning a completely different kind of bread, which in Hebrew is lechem, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, lechem, meaning leavened bread, which in the Greek is artos, okay? And Latin has two separate words, one meaning unleavened bread, one meaning leavened bread as well. Although right now I couldn't tell you which ones, what they are in the Latin. But the Greek of the Koine Greek of the New Testament also has two separate words. If you go to Matthew 26, verse 17, it says the following. Now the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and there it's called the Feast of Adzumos, the disciples came to Jesus saying unto him, where do you want to go that we prepare for you to eat the Passover? Okay. Jesus in 18 tells them where to go. They do what Jesus told them to do. made ready for the Passover. Okay. And then take a look at verse 26.
Okay.
In verse 26 of Matthew chapter 26, it says, "And as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, 'Take and eat, this is my body.'"
Okay.
We had just, if you look it up yourself, seen that it's the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Azumos, but here in Matthew 26, verse 26, the word for bread, as they were eating, Jesus took bread. The word they use is lechem. The word they use is artos. The word they use is leavened bread. Wait a minute. If it's the Feast of Unleavened Bread, where nobody is Jewish is supposed to even have in their possession leavening of any kind,
Right.
okay, then it's like saying it was the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and Jesus picked up the bread, picked up the leavened bread. So what is there to show that this was in fact Passover at all? Barring the whole issue of the Seder, what does Jesus have that we know he had at this Passover meal? We know he had the Passover lamb because earlier it said they went to the temple, which was still standing in Jesus's life. Okay. And we know that he had wine because he picked up the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, "Drink you all of it, for this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins." I'm not even going to talk about the unbiblical nature of that verse.
Right.
Okay. Where's the bitter herbs? Wouldn't it be a logical thing to say that at this Last Supper of Jesus, which supposedly was Passover, he had the Passover lamb, which they had gotten, as the text says, from the temple. He has wine, okay, and it has bitter herbs. And the wine is the blood, and the flesh is the flesh of the Passover lamb is the flesh of Jesus. And the bitter herbs, he could have said, the bitterness of the pain of the cross I'm going to suffer for you, or something silly like that, okay?
Right.
But he didn't. There is no evidence that this was Passover except the statement, "and it was Passover."
Right. That's true.
Which could have been made up and added to the text.
Right.
And when it says that he has bread, and it's leavened bread, not unleavened bread, it's lechem, not matzah, okay? Bread and wine is at every Jewish meal. Mm-hmm. How do you begin a Jewish meal?
Right.
Hamotzi. You begin it with the blessing over lechem, bread. Right. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. And by the way, the prayer Hamotzi lechem min haaretz represents the entire meal. So even if you only have matzah, you still recite Hamotzi lechem min haaretz because it's the blessing recited for the entirety of the meal, not just exclusively for leavened bread. But according to this, according to the text of Matthew 26, the only thing that Jesus had was leavened bread and the wine. I'm sorry, he had leavened bread and he had wine and he had the Passover lamb.
So someone said matzah is also called lechem. Is that true?
Nowhere I know of.
Okay.
The only time matzah, unleavened bread, is referred to as lechem is that when you are beginning the Passover meal, you recite both blessings, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, who brings forth bread from the earth, because that's the blessing recited over the entirety of the meal, okay, when baked wheat is present, okay. But you also recite al achilat matzah, who has commanded us concerning the eating of unleavened bread.
Right.
But the first blessing is for the entire meal. The second blessing is for the actual matzah, the unleavened bread.
So both of them.
But there's no bitter herbs.
So basically, both of them are lechem, but only one of them is matzah. Technically.
Yes.
Okay. Very good.
You could say that matzah is a type of lechem, but not really, because lechem means leavened bread. Okay. And in the strictest sense, okay, in the strictest sense, lechem means leavened bread, and matzah means unleavened bread. If you're trying to distinguish between the breads, you would use one for unleavened and one for leavened bread.
Got it.
But the point is that where's the bitter herbs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we don't really even know that this was a Passover because there's nothing that indicates it except they say it was Passover and they went to get a Passover lamb.
Right.
Or actually, I think we just had it. It says they went to get a lamb. It doesn't really even say that. I'll keep my Passover at your house. Easily could have been injected in the text, or they could have made up the whole thing that it was at Passover.
Okay.
But no bitter herbs. Every Jew on planet Earth knows that at least you have bitter herbs, unleavened bread. It's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And where's the bitter herbs? Okay. All right. It's important to understand, moving along, it's important to understand that why is there a Passover Seder? Why did the Jews have a Passover Seder?
As a reminder, as an order.
Right,
so they don't
but
forget.
why do they have to have a Seder to remind them?
It's repetition. It's tradition. It's to keep the tradition alive.
Yes, but why do you need the tradition of a Seder?
To make sure you don't
The answer?
forget anything.
I'm sorry, what?
To make sure you don't forget anything, that everything has got to be precise.
Yes, but why do you have to have a Haggadah and a Seder? What is a Seder? A Seder is an order.
Right.
The specific order you do the Passover celebration in. It's the order you do it in. It's a Seder. But why do you have to have that? The answer? Because the temple was destroyed.
Okay.
And if the entirety of the, just if you really want to look at it, okay, take a look real quick, okay, at...
By the way, I have the eSword software now.
Do what?
I've got eSword, by the way, by now.
Okay.
I downloaded eSword, so...
Okay, so can you post it?
Yes, sir, I can. What do you want me to look up?
Well, you don't really have to. We already covered it. They can look it up if they want to show that in chapter 26, verse whatever I said, it says
Matthew 26,
it's the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the word there is adzumos. But if they go ahead and look at 26:26, he's picking up the lechem, which is leavened bread.
There we go. Let's see what I got.
And if you go through the text yourself, you'll see that bitter herbs aren't even mentioned. So wine and bread could be any meal.
Right. Let me see if I can increase it.
Here's what I want you to do. Okay. We already saw that in Exodus 12:8. Okay, we are commanded to celebrate the Passover with a Passover lamb as a memorial, as a remembrance of what happened in the Exodus from Egypt, and we're supposed to do it with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs, right?
Right.
Real quick, just to show it, just show it. Deuteronomy 16. Okay.
Okay, Deuteronomy 16, what?
Right. Deuteronomy 16. Okay. Yes, Deuteronomy 16, and look at verse 2. Okay, and then we're going to look at verse 5 and 6. Okay, verse 2 is very simple. You shall therefore sacrifice the Passover unto the Eternal your God of the flock and the herd in the place which the Eternal shall choose to place his name there. Okay, what is that a reference to? The place that God chooses to place his name there.
The temple.
The temple, obviously.
Right.
So, first of all, wherever the Jews were when they wandered in the wilderness for the 40 years, basically wherever they were, they could do the sacrifice of the Passover. Once the temple was built, and Deuteronomy kind of, presupposes there's going to be a single place to do this at, namely the temple, you're supposed to do it at the temple. Okay. So take a look then at verse 5 through 6 of Deuteronomy 16. Okay. And you will see, you may not sacrifice the Passover within any of the gates, any of your gates, which the eternal your God gives you, but at the place which the eternal your God shall choose to place his name in. There you shall sacrifice the Passover at even, at the going down of the sun. So that's when the 14th day of the month is turning into the 15th day. And this is going to be important in a couple of minutes. Okay, at evening. In other words, sundown was the 14th day, because it's sundown, is now turning into the night of the 15th day. So this year, for example, Passover begins on a Friday night at sundown. So Friday late afternoon is when they would have slaughtered the lamb.
Right.
Okay? All right. But the point is Deuteronomy now centrally locates where the Passover sacrifices could take place to be only at the temple. When the temple is destroyed, does that mean they don't celebrate Passover anymore? No. Gamaliel II, probably about late 80s, about the year 80, 85, maybe even into 90, invents something called a Seder, a specific order that by going through the order, you remembered the Exodus from Egypt, placed into a book which was called the Haggadah. Okay, anybody knows anything about Judaism, these words are familiar. Haggadah comes from the word lahagid, to tell. So the Haggadah is the telling, okay, the story. And it's the story of the Exodus from Egypt, following a specific order or Seder. Why? Because the temple was destroyed. You couldn't go to the temple to get your Passover lamb. And the ritual became, instead of at a centralized location called the temple, it became in your own home. Remember, what did the rabbis say when the temple was destroyed? They started speaking of the Mikdash Ma'at. Mikdash is sanctuary. Ma'at means tiny, the small sanctuary. They didn't mean the synagogue. When the temple was destroyed, they began speaking of the Mikdash Ma'at, which was your personal home. Remember, what's the meal, the Shabbat meal? What is that like? That's like you are at the altar when you eat your meal. Okay? And so here in Deuteronomy 16, it's saying that the only place you can do the Passover sacrifice is at the temple. When the temple is destroyed, the rabbis, specifically Gamaliel II, okay, invented a home celebration to remind us of the events of the Passover, to incorporate children and get them to start getting interested and involved in their Judaism by asking questions. And it followed a specific order or Seder, which means none of this developed until well after Jesus was dead. William, am I being clear here?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. All right. So we don't know that it was Passover. We don't know that it was Passover, except they say, oh, it was Passover. It's Passover. You got to have a Passover lamb. You can't have a Western without being in the West. Okay, so, well, except for Star Wars. But the point is that if you're going to have, it's supposed to be a Passover, you got to have a Passover lamb. Okay. When the temple was destroyed and they weren't supposed to use the lamb anymore because you could only do that at the temple, they invented the Passover Seder to replace the ceremony, the ritual that would have been temple-based. Okay? Mm-hmm. I don't know how to get more clear than that.
Right.
Okay? All right. Why in the New Testament did it become important to have the Passover celebrated by Jesus? Because he's Jewish and because they have to show how Jewish he was. However, take a look at the timing, okay, of the crucifixion of Jesus and what is called the Passion narrative. Okay? If you take a look at the Passion narrative, let's see. Let me find it. Sorry it takes so long.
That's okay. I'm just kind of reading some of the YouTube comments.
Okay. Oh, good. I'm glad, because I'm so busy trying to get this down. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So you don't have to bother doing this, but the synoptic gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke disagree with the Gospel of John on what time, what day Jesus was celebrating the Last Supper. Consistently in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the synoptic gospels, Jesus was celebrating Passover at his Last Supper. So using this year's example, okay, forget that Saturday is Shabbat, just understand what I'm trying to say. Passover begins Friday night. So according to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it would be as if Jesus had his Last Supper Friday night and was then crucified on Saturday.
Right.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. But John, in chapter 19, verse 14, if you want to show that, you can.
What is John chapter what?
19. John chapter 19, verse 14.
Okay, I got it.
Got it?
Yep. You're on.
Okay, so John disagrees with Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They can't even agree on what day of the week it was. And John says, quote, and it was the preparation of the Passover, so Passover had not yet begun, and about the 6th hour, which means roughly noon, okay, 6 hours after sunrise, so give or take noon, and he said unto the Jews, behold your king. So Jesus is about to be crucified in the late afternoon as the 14th day becomes the 15th day, using this year as an example. Passover begins Friday night, so Friday night becomes the first Seder, and Jesus, according to John, his Last Supper would have been Thursday night, using this year as an example, and he would have been crucified late afternoon Friday, just like the Passover lamb was commanded to be sacrificed.
Right.
Because John is trying to make an equation between Jesus and every sacrifice. So Jesus becomes the epitome of all sacrifices. And what sacrifice does every Jew know about? Oh, Passover lamb. So they make him his Passover lamb.
Right.
Which, as we discussed real quick earlier, is just a silly. Passover lamb was not a sin sacrifice. It had nothing to do with sin.
Right.
Why did they sacrifice a lamb? Because the lamb was a way to thumb their nose at the Egyptians. Because the Egyptians repeatedly, in Genesis, Joseph's brothers come to Egypt with their father, and he says, by the way, don't tell the Pharaoh that you're shepherds, herders of sheep, because they don't really like shepherds. Why? Because the lambs, the sheep, represented one of their gods, and you don't shepherd God.
I would go as far as to say that it would be almost equivalent. The Hebrews sacrificing a lamb, killing a lamb, would be almost equivalent as like an Iranian person coming over to the United States and burning an American flag.
Or burning a picture of Jesus in effigy.
Right, but you see the point.
Because remember,
right?
it was, the lamb was the symbol of their God. They worshiped the lamb because the lamb was a symbol of one of their many gods.
Right.
Okay? So making Jesus the Passover lamb is like saying Jesus is your pagan idol. It's really not a brilliant way to do things. Also, what is the obvious thing that we know about any kind of sacrifice? It had to be without blemish.
Right.
Blemish doesn't mean sin. A lamb cannot sin. To sin, you have to know the difference between good and evil. Okay? Now, another video we did, you certainly remember, there was no sin in the Garden of Eden because they didn't know the difference between good and evil. They didn't know it was bad to disobey God because they had not eaten the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of the difference between good and evil or whatever. They
had no point of reference at all.
Exactly. No point of reference.
Right.
So neither does a sheep. So how does a sheep be it's a silly thing to say that, blemish means without sin. Right. Nonsense. If he's a sheep, he's a sheep.
Right.
But he's not a sheep. He's a human sacrifice, which is an additional problem of having Jesus be the Passover lamb. He wasn't a lamb. He was a human.
And he wasn't beaten And he wasn't beaten and blemished after he died. He was beaten and blemished before execution.
Absolutely. Right. He was beaten and blemished. Look, God won't accept a human sacrifice, but even if God did accept a human sacrifice, it can't be with a blemish.
Right.
And they not only that, but they gave him the crown of thorns around his head.
Right.
And every picture I've ever seen of Jesus, the thorns are picking holes in his skin, his scalp, and he's bleeding. Sorry, that's a blemish. Yep. Can't be a sacrifice. Just every way, shape, and form that the Christians use the Passover lamb is just wrong.
Yeah, like almost every single aspect of it is.
Exactly. Okay, so John 19:14 says that, using this year as an example, if Passover begins Friday night, he wasn't crucified Thursday. I'm sorry, he wasn't crucified Friday, where Thursday night was the first Seder, the first night of Passover. We know it couldn't be Seder. We just talked about that. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, right.
According to John, Passover began Friday night, and like the Passover lamb, Jesus was put to death on the cross late Friday afternoon, as the 14th day of the month of Nisan was turning into the 15th day. So all sorts of reasons why it doesn't make sense. Who's right? John? And by the way, there are Christians who will now say, well, actually, to make this correct, it has to be a Wednesday night. Well, when the entire world of Christendom, okay, when all of Christianity celebrates Good Wednesday,
Ash Wednesday, yeah.
Okay, then I'll listen to them about what day they think the actual crucifixion was on.
Mm-hmm, right.
Remember something else, okay? Remember something else, which it's not really germane to what we're talking about, okay? But according to the New Testament, Jesus himself said he had a prophecy he was going to fulfill involved with his crucifixion, and he doesn't even do that.
Okay, explain.
How many days is he going to be in the ground?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
3 days and 3 nights.
Right, you can't map that out anywhere in the New Testament.
There's no way to map that out. He had to have been in the ground, not just Friday,
right?
Not just Friday night, not just Saturday, not just Saturday night, not just Sunday, but to have the third night he had to be at least a part of after it was sundown Sunday night.
Right, and I find it interesting too that his time spent on the execution stake or pole tree, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
If from most Christians I've ever talked to, Christian theologians and teachers, they would say, the Romans had this down to a science. 3 days. It took 3 days roughly. That's why they had to break his knees to make him die faster. But he wasn't even on there for a full day, not even a half a day. He was actually on there on the cross for like 6 hours, maybe 3 hours in one account,
well,
6 hours
on
the
which
other.
Version, because they can't even agree on how long he was on it.
And so the point being, it would technically be almost scientifically impossible for someone to die on the cross without broken legs in 3 to 6 hours, which means he was in the tomb recovering, not being resurrected.
There's a terrible, horrible book. It's maybe well written, but it's really just not a great book. It's called The Passover Plot, where they take various verses out of the New Testament and write it as if it were a novel, where when they gave him vinegar, or they gave him vinegar and myrrh, or they gave him vinegar, can't even agree on what they gave him, that it was actually a drug to make him look like he was dead.
Oh, right.
It's just really not a good book. It's really whatever.
Well, that's still a better theory.
Not exactly as scholarly as...
That's still a better theory, though, than saying that he died and resurrected after 6 hours or 3 hours.
Well, remember that Elijah also resurrected people from the dead, and that didn't make them God either.
Right, agreed.
Okay, Matthew 12:39, just real quick, don't even go to look at it, because we didn't have time. Okay, but Jesus answered and said to them, an evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. There shall no sign be given to that generation, but the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Jesus... Friday is 1 day, Friday night is 1 night, Saturday is second day, Saturday night is second night, Sunday is third day, but there's no night. So according to Matthew, according to Luke, he was in the grave for 3 days and 2 nights, but according to John, when they go to see him, it's still dark. You don't even have a portion of Sunday daylight. Okay, so therefore he's only in the earth 2 days and 2 nights. So they can't even agree on anything. Okay, be that as it may, the point is that the every aspect of the story of the crucifixion of Jesus is so contradictory to the Passover Seder that it makes no sense to say. First, it makes very little sense, I'll say, that it was Passover at all. Otherwise, what was he doing with lechem, which we talked about? Okay. By the way, when he's coming into Jerusalem, which we didn't even discuss, but when he's coming into Jerusalem, what did they meet him with? What was in their hands?
Yeah, palm branches,
coming in on
right.
Either on the 1 donkey or 2 donkeys, depending on which version you want to read.
Right, yeah, palm branches, which actually brings up an earlier question, and maybe now's the proper time to comment on it.
Sukkot.
Right.
It's Sukkot.
That was the question earlier. It says, would it could have possibly been Sukkot because of the palm branches and things that was way before him.
And then they'll say, oh, but they greeted all kings with the palm branches. Really? Show me that. Let me see that somewhere,
Right.
Oh, it was because they recognized his royalty. Well, he wasn't even royal. I mean, we could take hours just talking about this.
By the way, real quick, big shout out, Shmuel. Thank you, brother. I got your donation in the mail today. Appreciate it.
Yay, people. Everybody should follow Shmuel's pattern, and they should also give.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, the expenses are increasing. They're not actually stabilizing. So if you guys can help out, I said the expenses here are actually only increasing. They're not actually stable. So they kind of keep.
Why are they going up?
Well, it's because utility bills go up, and now summertime's coming on, and all these updates on computers, and replacing wires and replacing RAM and all this. It's a constant maintenance thing. So. So any help you guys could do would be great. It means I would have to work less out in the heat to pay for it all. So carry on.
Going back to the Last Supper. So why were they so intent on making this Passover? Because Passover is the season of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus, according to Christian theology, was freeing people from their sins. They no longer feel held guilty for their sin because Jesus died for them, which is another major problem we're not going to go into. So the reason why they invent this story about Jesus' death being Passover, even though none of the symbols, they're missing the symbol of bitter herbs, all the reasons we already discussed, is because they're trying to tack themselves on to the idea of freedom. Okay. Let's see. All right. Okay. Now, there's another element we have to discuss regarding the Passover Seder.
Okay.
Jesus would never have known how many pieces of matzah would have been on a Seder plate that included charoset, parsley to dip in salt water, a egg. None of these symbols were part of Passover until after the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70. 30, 40 years, whatever, after Jesus was dead. Okay. There wouldn't have been a Seder plate. There wouldn't have been charoset. There would have been wine, and who knows, maybe there was 4 cups. But having wine at a meal doesn't make it Passover, because wine was a common drink for every meal in the ancient world, because you needed the alcohol of the wine to kill the bad water.
Right.
I mean, why is France has notoriously bad water system. That's why the French drink a lot more wine than like we do in the United States, because we have a much superior water system. Okay, so all right. At any rate,
okay.
Charoset invented after destruction of the temple. Dipping the Jesus is. Oh, I forgot to say this. In the text of where'd it go? Matthew. Come on, we're bouncing around so much. 26. Okay. Jesus says that the person who dips his hand with mine. Come on, there it is. 26:23. You don't have to bring it up. And he answered and said, "He that dips his hand with me in the dish, the same shall betray me." So the Christian, whoa, that's dipping. See, they had dipping the charoset. No, it doesn't mean they had dipping the charoset. Dipping his hand could be dipping in the water dish to to, wash your hands in the middle of the meal.
Andrea, thank you.
Okay.
And Scotty Hilton, thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you to all of them.
Yes.
Okay. William, I know that you have been to a Christ in the Passover, Christologized Seder, Jesus in the Passover, whatever Seder, right?
Oh, definitely. I actually gave a couple of them myself.
Exactly. So Christians will take anything, especially Messianic, quote unquote, Jews, will take anything that they can from Judaism, our symbolism, our holidays, holy days, life cycle events, anything and everything. I even read a book about how the shofar blowing is actually a reference to Jesus.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they'll say, oh, see, it paints a story of Jesus, and they can interpret anything. By the way, you do know that what they do is they say, I have a garden, and in that garden I'm planting cucumbers, and I'm going to plant next to the cucumbers, I'm going to put into that cucumber garden, I'm going to put flowers. And then they say, see, the natural progression of the cucumbers is to become flowers. Or they'll say, we're getting the flowers from the cucumbers, which shows that the source of the flowers is cucumbers. And you're probably thinking, what is he talking about? What I'm talking about is that's what they do with the Jewish rituals. They plant their Jesus into them so that when they pull it out of that Jewish ritual, they can say, see, that's the Hebrew roots of Christianity. That's the Jewish roots of Christianity, because they plant their Jesus, their flowers, into the cucumber bed being the Jewish ritual, and then they say, see, since I found flowers in the cucumber bed, cucumber's natural, direction it's growing is towards becoming flowers or something like that. And that's what they say about, Jewish stuff. So what's the primary thing of Passover is matzah, unleavened bread. You ask any Jew at all, how many pieces of matzah go on the Seder plate, and they will always say 3.
Right.
Okay. We have very, 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 very old Haggadahs. Okay. We have Haggadahs going back hundreds of years. Even before you have that, you've got the Mishnah, okay, where the Mishnah will say how to do a Passover Seder, right?
Right.
Okay. In the earliest passages in, let me find my reference here, Brachot 39b, okay, when it's describing what you do at a Passover Seder, it says you take the 1.5 pieces of matzah, not 3? No,
right.
Not 3. You take the one whole piece of matzah and a broken piece of matzah. Why is it not fully 2 pieces? Because what do we call matzah? We call it lechem oni, the bread of the poor. Why? First, because it didn't get time to leaven, made on their backs as they're leaving Egypt in haste. Okay, and second of all, because if you're rich, you have 2 full pieces. But it's the bread of the poor. So you don't have 2 full pieces. Mm-hmm. You got 1 piece, and then you have a half of a piece.
Interesting.
And the earliest part of the Mishnah in describing the Passover Seder says that you have 1.5 pieces. Okay? Usually with the half a piece on top. Okay? And let's see. Let's see. I know you're here somewhere. I got all these in my notes. Okay. By the way, the Vilna Gaon had his own Haggadah. Okay. Published his own Haggadah. Had his own Haggadah.
Okay.
Elijah of Vilna. Okay. That was in the 1700s. 1700 years or more since the time Jesus was born. And according to that Haggadah, you only have 1.5 pieces of matzah. Okay? By the way, if I have matzah on a plate and there's a full piece and there's a half a piece, I may refer to them as both pieces, right?
Okay.
I'm not going to always say 1 and 1/2. I'm going to say, hand me them both, right? I'm going to say there are 2 pieces there. One of them is a full piece, one of them is a half piece, but it's still 2 pieces. Just only one of them is a full piece, right?
Okay.
Because they're 2 different pieces of matzah. One just happens to be half the size of the other. Okay. So in the Vilna Gaon, he's only describing in his own 1700, 18th century Haggadah. His Haggadah only talks about 2 pieces of matzah. Okay. All right. Which one do they break? Oh, you break the middle matzah. Well, to have a middle, you have to have one on top and one on the bottom. But if you only have 2.5, you got 1.5, which one do you break? Well, you break the first one you can grab. You rush to do a mitzvah. You don't skip over one commandment to do another commandment. So usually people aren't going to put the small one on the bottom of the big one, on the top one. Let's see. According to Rambam, according to Rashi in the Vitri, Machzor Vitri, Rambam says it doesn't matter which one you take. It doesn't have to be a middle one, top one, second one, first one, whatever. It doesn't matter. Take one of the pieces and break it. Okay. Certain ones, Rekeach says that you take the upper matzah. Okay. By the way, I don't want to put him on the spot. You're doing interviews with Moshe Shulman. He's got all of this laid out beautifully.
Right.
I wish you would do a whole thing on how Christian Passover Seders completely misrepresent the history and the content of a Haggadah. And he just, well, at any rate, all right, brilliant man. All right. So, at any rate,
Okay.
the idea that 3 matzahs represents the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, the one in the middle, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, the one in the middle, which is the Son, is the one that is broken, which is the crucifixion. It's hidden. By the way, why was it hidden? It wasn't hidden till the 1600s, okay, in Germany, when the families in Germany saw their kids falling asleep before the meal was over, before they even did the whole Haggadah. And so to keep them interested in the Haggadah, what they did was they hid it so that they stayed awake, and then they would compete with each other, the kids would, to find the matzah, and then somebody would get a prize. 1,600 years after Jesus was dead. So the idea that taking the matzah out is a foreshadowing. How can you foreshadow something that happened 1,600 years before it?
Right.
Okay. William, here's a great analogy. Christianity will say that Christianity developed from Judaism. Why? Because they can Christologize, put Jesus into any Jewish ritual, and once they find him there, they say, hey, see, the Jewish roots of Christianity, because they planted it there.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
To make something called pizza, at minimum, you have to have the bread, the dough. You have to have the tomato sauce, and you have to have cheese. That's minimum to be a pizza, right?
Yep. Bread.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, the dough, if it is allowed to have bubbles in it, will create a really bad-looking pizza. So you got to, get rid of all the bubbles. Well, that's like taking Jesus's body and, beating it, scourging him, and putting the crown of thorns on his head. Okay. The tomato sauce, that's the second layer, is red. That's like the blood of Jesus. Oh my God, it's all about Jesus. Pizza is all about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, the cheese is spread out over the whole thing, like Jesus's death covers the sins of humanity.
So that proves that Jesus was Italian, not Jewish.
Well, what it proves is that the roots of Christianity is pizza.
Right.
If the Hebrew roots, because they Christologize our Passover Seder and say it's all about Jesus, proves that Christianity came from the Seder, come from Judaism, then if I can show you it in pizza, which I just did, then obviously Christianity comes from pizza. It's the pizza roots of Christianity, not the Hebrew roots, not the Jewish roots of Christianity, but the pizza roots. All right. I think that's hysterically funny, but you didn't laugh.
That is a little funny. I still like the Italian part better.
Well, yeah, I like mine better. But by the way.
Yes, sir.
Domino's Pizza.
Yes.
I was in college, so let's say first half of the 1970s. I should have kept it. But they had a history of pizza, and according to their publication, original pizza goes back to the Roman soldiers who were occupying the Promised Land, and the Jews would have unleavened bread, which is very bland, and in order to give it taste, they would put spices and cheese on it. And then later, when Columbus discovered America, whatever that means, and eventually they brought tomatoes back to Europe, then eventually they added the tomato sauce to the unleavened bread, which is flat, and the cheese and spices on it, and that's the origins, according to Domino's Pizza. It has its roots in unleavened bread, matzah, and cheese, and the tomato of the Western Hemisphere. Just thought I'd tell you that.
Very nice, very nice.
According to Domino's.
Yep. I hear you. All right, well, according to the TikTok talker, it's 9:05.
Oh, you're no fun.
Yeah, but you and I have some YouTubing to do, so some YouTube trainings to do. So we'll probably wrap this baby up so we can spend some more time.
Let's see, break the upper matzah, and Rambam says it doesn't even matter. That's Machzor Vitri, 271, 281, 282. Doesn't make a difference which one you take. Let's see. All right. That pretty well covers everything I have to say, I guess.
Okay, very good.
I'm probably missing a whole bunch, but you know what I mean.
That's okay. Well, like I said, if it turns out you get a lot of feedback on this thing, positive feedback, then we'll cover it more next week because it's closer to Pesach. Speaking of which,
yes.
Are we? What day does Pesach fall on? Are we going to be having a show Monday night? I don't really know. I haven't been paying attention.
Do what?
Do we have a show next week? Pesach's coming up,
sure.
So
absolutely. It's still early in April.
Oh yeah. Oh, when is Pesach? I was thinking Pesach was next week.
Passover begins Friday night, the night of the 19th.
Oh man. Okay, good.
First Seder is 19th, Friday night at night.
Thank you, Andrea.
Second Seder is the night of Saturday night, 20th.
Got it.
Okay, the day of the 20th is the first day of Passover. So, the night of the 22nd, we could have the Tanakh talk.
Okay.
Okay. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It won't affect us.
Right.
It will not affect us Monday night.
Good.
22nd and 29th should be okay.
Very cool. Well, just big shout out to all you viewers out there and my moderators as well. I just added a moderator on there. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So it's nice to have moderators. Thank you, Andrea. She's kind of one of my top ones. She kind of stays on top of everything for the most part when she's on, and then a few more kind of good backup, a couple bouncers in the house. God forbid we ever need a bouncer, but sometimes they're necessary. So, but yeah, good to see everybody. Thank you guys. I've been watching some of the chat, and I really appreciate you guys. There's been like 2 or 3 donations coming through PayPal just during this show, which is really kind of freaking me out. That's awesome. That's cool. Anyway, thank you guys, and Rabbi, thank you. It's always fun.
My pleasure. I hope it was interesting and useful.
Yeah, it absolutely was. I'm actually going to go back and rewatch the show or re-listen to it tomorrow on the way to work. So. Oh, yeah. It's always a pleasure. So thank you all. You guys have a wonderful night. And David's giving me rabbit ears. Say hi, David.
Hi.
No, I said say hi, David.
Hi.
No, say hi, David.
No.
Hi, David.
Hi.
He refuses to say his own name. Okay.
That was fun when I was there a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
Hey,
yeah.
by the way, I didn't even look. Is Christo on tonight? I didn't.
Actually, somebody said it was good seeing you last week. It might have been Christo Cheney. I'm not sure.
Christo, it was great seeing you. He came in for a bar mitzvah.
Let me go all the way back
Friends
up
of his are in my synagogue, and he came in for the bar mitzvah with their son. And I got to actually meet him face to face. Hi, Christo.
I think it
very cool,
might
by the
have
way.
been him. I'm trying to find the actual comment here. Where'd it go?
Trying to find it too real quick, but I don't think I have.
It was very early on when it happened. So
Okay.
I just assumed it was him because I knew you guys were going to hook up. So let's see. It's okay. Yeah, you can reach out to him or go back and rewatch this anyway. It'll show up here somewhere. So yeah, so it's been fun. So we're going to go ahead and log off here now, and we will see you, Rabbi, in a few minutes, and I'll see you guys the same time, same place next week. Hashem willing. So y'all have a great week.
Christo Cheney, the Hebrew. Oh wait, no.
Was it him? Is he online tonight?
Yeah, but he was on. Christo, if you're still on, it was great meeting you face to face.
Very cool. Very cool.
It was cool. It was very cool.
All right.
I know so many people through the internet, but we've never met face to face.
Right.
So,
That's okay. That's okay. Sometimes it might happen eventually. So we'll see. All right, everybody, you guys take care. See you all. Shalom, shalom, Shavua Tov. Until next time on the other side.
חשוב מכל חשוב